economic advisers have suggested that it is time to review the policy, but number 10, when questioned, have said they're committed to it. So, Mr Speaker, which is it?
Mr Speaker, this government is committed to the triple lock. It was this government that introduced the triple lock. And she might want to have a word with her own deputy leader, who I don't think provided much clarity on the matter. And remember, Mr Speaker, I think we all remember when it came to pensions, what we can remember is Gordon Brown's 75p a week increase.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Week in, week out, as I meet businesses in my constituency of Meriden, I hear about how artificial intelligence is transforming the way we work in sectors like life sciences, the automotive sector and financial services. Does my right honourable friend agree that artificial intelligence will transform the way humanity will live in the 21st century? And through his upcoming Global AI Summit, will he ensure that appropriate guardrails are put in place to protect society as we become world leaders in this technology?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is right to highlight the incredible power of AI to transform not just businesses and our productivity, but also public services in areas like health and education. But we do need guardrails to allow us to make the most of the opportunities of AI and to address risks. Our regulatory approach sets out a responsible and proportionate approach to AI that balances risk and innovation, and I look forward to working with international partners about how we do this at a global level at our upcoming AI Safety Summit.
Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Luton Airport is trying to massively expand its airport capacity from 18 million passengers per year to a whopping 32 million passengers per year. This will blight the lives of thousands of residents across Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, and especially in North St Albans, who live under the flight path, but it will also fly in the face of the advice from the government's own climate advisers. It's been reported that the Prime Minister is getting ready to ignore his climate advisers. Is that true?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr Speaker, but what I would say is my approach to getting to net zero is not one that requires people to give up doing the things that they want to do and enjoying, like flying. The right thing to be doing is, as we are, investing in new technologies and funding them, things like sustainable aviation fuel, because that's how we'll decarbonise aviation on the transition to net zero, not force people to give everything up.
Mr Speaker, when the Prime Minister was Chancellor of the Exchequer, he put the full might of the Treasury behind the 10-year drug strategy, which with its ADA projects is now turning lives around across England and Wales. But a key part of that strategy was developing a new approach to possession. He will know from his own constituency that in towns like Andover, in mine, possession is of a huge concern, particularly to parents of young people who spend some time in the town centre. Now, the Home Office issued a white paper on this over a year ago. The consultation closed in October last year. So can I ask the Prime Minister to commit that in the forthcoming King's Speech we can see some legislation to finally deal with this pernicious problem?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for all of his work and attention on this area. It was good to work with him on Project ADA in particular. He's right to highlight that drugs destroy lives and families, hitting the most vulnerable in our society the hardest. The 10-year drug strategy, which he helped put in place, is ambitious and backed with a record £3 billion funding. As my right honourable friend highlighted, we have consulted on a new drug possession offences framework, and I can assure him that ministers will keep him and this House updated on future plans.
Kate Alone.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In the last few hours, I've been contacted by the head teacher of St James's Church of England Primary School in Blackburn. The head teacher is desperately seeking help after a RAC survey conducted on the 7th of September was inconclusive. The urgent intrusive inspection that was supposed to follow has not been arranged by the Department of Education. The potentially affected part of the building has been closed off, with children crammed into a dining room learning on tables. Staff are unable to access facilities, and the whole school has been hugely inconvenienced. The head teacher has been unable to reach the Department of Education. Can I implore the Prime Minister to get the Secretary of State to Education to investigate this urgently?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, I'm sorry for the disruption at schools as we work hard to identify those affected. But what DfE is doing is fully funding the inspection process, ensuring that we are rapidly now inspecting and surveying all potentially affected schools, paying for that work, but also now with the increase of up to 80 dedicated caseworkers, St James's Primary School, like others, should have a dedicated point of contact to work through those issues. I'll ensure that the Secretary of State and the Department are in touch with the school and the Honourable Member on it for an update.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Personally, I know the stark impact of dementia and the effect it has on the families of our million citizens who live with it. It was my honour last week to sponsor Alzheimer's research here in the UK to highlight the recent progress on a new diagnostic test and new drugs that could be available as early as next January. I welcome dementia's inclusion in the government's major condition strategy. But would my right honourable friend ask his Secretary of State to convene a dementia medicines task force so that we can take advantage of this progress in research? And would he consider Alzheimer's Research's request for a dementia champion?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I start by thanking my honourable friend for his work in this important area. Regulators are working closely with industry to evaluate new dementia medicines because, of course, we want patients to benefit from rapid access to safe and effective treatments. We're also strongly committed to funding dementia research, including doubling the amount allocated to this to £160 million a year by next year. And last year we launched the Dame Barbara Windsor Dementia Mission, backed up with new funding, which will work with industry to develop biomarkers, data and digital science innovations and strengthen our trials in dementia. And I look forward to hearing from him more suggestions about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the 1990s, under the Conservative government, people were dying because of the length of time they were waiting on NHS waiting lists. In 2023, we've seen an increasing number of people dying while they're on an NHS waiting list before they get treatment. Is the Prime Minister ashamed that people are dying needlessly under his watch?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the number on waiting lists has been impacted significantly by the pandemic, but that's why we've put record funding in place to help address it, including new innovations like surgical hubs, same-day emergency care, virtual wards, and such like. But I would gently point out to the honourable gentleman, in England, partly the reason that the waiting lists are not coming down as fast as we would like is because of strike action by doctors, something that is supported by him and his colleagues who have stood on the picket lines ensuring that patients cannot get access to care. It is also him and his party that are saying that they will repeal the laws that we have put in place that will guarantee patients safe access to medical treatment in the event of industrial action. So if he wants to make this issue emotional, he should say to people, why is it that he believes patients should be deprived of access to life-saving care because of industrial action, Mr.
Closed question. Question 11.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we regularly engage with local partners across the West Midlands to gather insight and intelligence on the economy. Earlier this year, we initiated the Trailblazer Devolution Deal, which will help include measures to help businesses thrive. And I see that just the other week, Business Growth West Midlands was launched by the Mayor, backed with £100 million in funding for business support.
Michael Fabricant.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and I'm glad to hear that the West Midlands growth continues to expand. However, we do have a problem in Lichfield, and that is road closures, and we don't know how long they're going to go on for, footpath closures, we don't know how long they're going to go on for, HS2 who are doing these closures, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is saying. HS2, Mr. Speaker, is the most dysfunctional organisation I've ever had to deal with. Will the Prime Minister, in the short term, try and restructure HS2 so it works like a company should? And in the longer term, can he save other constituencies by stopping HS2 at the end of phase 1?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the frustration that this is causing to my honourable friend's constituents. I am told that HS2 Limited is prioritising the completion of works underway to keep disruption to a minimum, including roadworks in Lichfield, but I know the Transport Secretary will continue to hold them to account, and the company will keep local communities informed about future works.
Mahadi.
Mr. Speaker.
UK bill payers are facing an extra £1 billion because of the government's failure to agree new offshore wind. With Russia using energy as a weapon, when will the Prime Minister take energy security seriously and protect us from the whims of fossil fuel autocrats?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do take energy security seriously. Indeed, we created a brand new department to focus on energy security. But it's a bit rich. It's a bit rich coming from the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, that wants to cut off our access to homegrown British oil and gas, Mr. Speaker, which will increase our reliance on foreign oil and gas, increase our reliance on dictators and exposure to those markets, and as the independent reports have also said, will be bad for the climate, as those imported fossil fuels come with something like 2 or 3 times the emissions. Their policy is not just bad for the environment, Mr. Speaker, it's bad for our energy security and it's bad for British jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The collapse of a potential rescue deal for Wilko this week brings added urgency to the regeneration of our town centres and driving that forward. Would you agree to meet myself and the leader of Torbay Council to identify ways through government support and planning reform this can be accelerated?
Well, Mr. Speaker, investment through both arms of our Towns Fund is part of how we will regenerate and unleash the potential of our town centres. I'm delighted to hear that that investment includes Torbay's £21.9 million town deal and indeed £13.5 million for Paynton via the Future High Streets Fund. But my honourable friend is right about ensuring that our planning system is friendly for small businesses, and that's what we're doing, making it much easier to convert unused shops into cafes, restaurants or indeed new homes, and it's an example of how we're helping our high streets adapt and thrive.
Mr. Speaker, the new Defence Secretary has been quoted as saying that there could be RAC present in military buildings. So can the Prime Minister today guarantee the safety of our military personnel and equipment, or is this yet another ticking time bomb that the government has failed to see coming?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, actually across the public sector, departments make sure that they follow the technical guidance with regard to RAC, identify and mitigate as required, and as you've seen with example in the NHS, we have moved hospitals affected into the new hospital programme, but also more generally, this is the government that has invested record sums in defence, £24 billion at the last spending review, the single biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Philip Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's vitally important that we retain, recruit and protect our prison officers. So will the Prime Minister agree to stop any prisoner who assaults a prison officer from being released early from jail? This simple measure will be very popular with prison officers. It will be very popular with the public. And you never know, Mr. Speaker, it might even find favour with the parties opposite, who normally think that the only people who should be in prison are people who misgender people.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, prisoners, my honourable friend is right, the prisoners who are violent towards people working and living in prisons will and should face the full consequences of their actions. I'm pleased that the recent Police Crime Sentencing in Courts Act actually increased the maximum penalty for up to 2 years imprisonment for those who assault emergency workers, and that includes prison officers. And the Ministry of Justice will continue to press for charges for more serious offences, such as ABH, where appropriate.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the weekend, 7 global economic powers came together, including India, the US and the EU, to agree a monumental trade agreement, but not the UK. Can the Prime Minister say if he chose not to sign up because he thought it was presumably a bad deal, or was the UK left out altogether because this Prime Minister has as weak a reputation on the world stage as he does at home?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the honourable lady was here for the statement on Monday. I rather assume not. I think what she's describing wasn't a trade deal, so first of all, she should get her facts right. And as I explained on Monday, there are lots of different ways that countries will participate in solving international issues. We at the same conference that she mentioned, the same summit, we announced a record investment to the Green Climate Fund. It is the single biggest investment by this country to help with international climate finance, and it was warmly welcomed by countries at the summit who can see that the UK is taking a leadership role and helping countries adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week we were hit by the devastating news that all Wilko stores would be closing, meaning the loss of 12,500 jobs. And Bassett Law and Worksop are the home of Wilko's HQ and a distribution centre with 1,500 jobs set to go. But Wilko has been mismanaged for years. And in the last decade, over 77 million has been paid out to shareholders. And recently, the HQ was sold for 48 million before being leased back. So can the Prime Minister reassure my constituents and all those nationally affected by the demise of Wilko that he and the government will do everything in their power to help support people into jobs and make sure their redundancies and pensions are protected, and we will take whatever action is available to us to hold the ownership to account?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend knows, some of the topics that he raised will be commercial matters for the company, but I do know that this is a concerning time for workers at Wilko. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is keeping close to developments, and we have already started supporting those who have been made redundant, and we stand ready to support others to the fullest of our abilities.
Lillian Greenwood.
The head of the Army, General Sir Patrick Sanders, has said the UK must forge an army capable of fighting alongside our allies and defeating Russia in battle. So why is the government still pushing ahead with further cuts of 10,000 troops to the British Army?
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, I'd say to the Honourable Lady, this is the government that has put a record amount into our armed forces, £24 billion. We remain the second largest investor in our defence in NATO, and as we saw at the NATO summit, other countries look to us for leadership. How the armed forces allocate that record funding is a matter for chiefs to make sure that we have the capabilities we need to meet the threats of today. That is a decision that they will make, and we will back them, but no one can doubt our commitment to funding properly the armed forces and ensuring that we keep this country safe.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly said that democracies like the UK, not authoritarian regimes, should lead the fight on global challenges like development and climate change. So because the links between failed regimes, climate change and the numbers of asylum seekers are growing, would my right honourable friend ensure that doing development democratically is a key theme in the White Paper on International Development, and would he also visit the Westminster Foundation's Garden of Democracy exhibition here in Parliament to highlight our promotion of democratic values abroad?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for highlighting the exhibition in Portcullis House, and I know members will have heard his invitation. We are consulting widely on the detail of the White Paper on International Development and what it should say, including specifically the role of democracy in development, and I'd encourage all interested organisations and individuals to share their ideas through the public consultation.
Can I just say thank you to Sir John Benjer and his final PMQs and his loyal service to the House. We do appreciate it. Thank you, Sir John.
اهلا وسهلا. الاخوان من الامارات؟ لا قطر. من قطر. اهلا وسهلا. انا اسمي حسن العلوي، اشتغل مع وكالة الانباء الامريكية، وبنعمل مباشر لهم عن عمليات الانقاذ وكل شيء. ممكن واحد يحكي معنا بالعربي انجليزي مش مشكلة، بس عن من المخول له بالحديث؟ الضابط اللي بيحكي مع زميلي؟ اوكي خلاص، شكرا. نعم الحاج. نعم انا سولته قال لي ذاك الضابط اللي كان معك هو اللي عطاني كل شيء، هو اللي سميته قال لي هو اللي مخول له خديتها شويه، لان قال لك دابا حنا في الاستراحه كاين اللي كيقول شي كلمه يقول لا ما غناخذوش حنا الكلام ديالو باش يفهمها هو ما غيفهمهاش. سبحان الله العظيم الناس القطريين هنا دابا وصلوا لثلاث سيدي يحيى بهذا الاستحاله مزيان. This is the Qatari rescue team from